I spent a lot of time in the previous videos talking about the psychology and mindset. Now I want to kind of hit on what's the story we tell ourselves. The reason why I say it's a natural extension of the mindset and psychology. But the story becomes a thing of permanence. And there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system that plays a huge, huge role in this. And what's interesting about the reticular activating system is it's a filter. It's a filter that helps protect you again, because again, the primitive brain is designed to protect you. But what's interesting about it is it's not always accurate. Couple illustrations. Imagine you're driving down Main Street, whatever your town is, at 12 o'clock noon. What are you going to notice as you're driving down Main Street at 12 noon? All the food places, because your body is craving food, right? So all you're going to see is Arby's and Wendy's and Taco Bell, or maybe those aren't your food choices, but whatever your food choices are, you're going to see all the various illustrations of how you can satisfy this need to eat. At 2:30 in the afternoon, when you're driving down the same Main Street, are you going to notice those same restaurants? I think not. I think instead what you're maybe going to notice is Starbucks or whatever that afternoon pick-me-up kind of place is that you think about. Coffee place maybe. So the brain filters out all those things and notices what it thinks is useful. And I'll give you an illustration of this, another illustration. If you go back to the 1980s in New York City, New York City was not a very safe place and pretty dangerous, a lot of violent crime. And then there was this group of people that came together called the Guardian Angels. The whole premise was if people were outside more often because there were more people on the street, it would make it more safe. And all they did was walk on the streets late at night to keep people safe. So imagine now, though, you're walking down some dark alley and I come out in a hoodie and I'm a guardian angel. And all of a sudden you see me and I look sketchy because I'm not in a nice dress shirt like this with a cool background. But instead I look sort of sketchy and a little bit dangerous, and now you take off running the other way. So the reticular activating system in that case saw me as a threat had you run down an alley where maybe you did get in trouble because of a perception, right? So the story you told yourself is I was dangerous. Maybe rightfully so, because maybe in a hoodie I look really dangerous. But it turned out it got you into danger. I'll give you one more example. Probably about 20 years ago, there was this gnarly car accident down in Texas. A couple teenage girls were driving in the car, and they got in this horrible enough car accident that one of the girls died on sight, and the other one was unconscious. And so they were struggling to identify the girls because they same body style and image and size and hair color and all that. They kind of looked like twins even though they weren't. So eventually they figured out which girl was which, of course. And so you've got one family sitting here bedside doing this whole bedside vigil, praying over their daughter, hoping their daughter comes back, and you have this other family who's preparing for a funeral and did complete the funeral. And so, 3 weeks or so passes, and all of a sudden the girl in the coma comes out of the coma. And you know what they realized? They had them backwards. Crazy as that sounds. You'd think they'd have been able to figure that out, but they didn't. Now the question becomes, the family that buried their daughter and thought their daughter was dead, were those emotions real? And the answer is, oh yeah. And the family that sat their bedside praying over their daughter, hoping their daughter was going to come back, were those emotions real? Yes. But in fact, they had bad information. It turned out they had them backwards. So the challenge with the reticular activating system is it's not an accurate filter, but it's a filter nonetheless. And it impacts the story we tell ourselves. So the challenge becomes, what story are you telling yourself? Maybe another illustration of this is there's a lot of people who believe that they're stuck by their circumstance. The economy is terrible, therefore my business is going to struggle. My relationship is terrible, therefore, I'm not going to be happy at home. My body, I don't have good genetics, and so I have a bad set of genetics and a bad body, therefore my health is going to be terrible. These are all stories we tell ourselves. I want to illustrate it a different way. Imagine, how many of you have ever heard of the lottery curse? And if you're not familiar with it, The lottery curse is a statistic of the percentage of people who win the lottery and within 5 years declare bankruptcy and are actually in a worse position than they were before they won the lottery. Now, I illustrate this because previously I said we have all these problems, right? The economy stinks, therefore my business stinks. My marriage stinks, therefore my personal life is going to stink. Problems that impact our lives. But now all of a sudden you have this amazing problem called $300 million, the lottery you just won. But you make terrible decisions about this amazing problem you have, and you end up in a worse place. So I would surmise that the reverse could be true as well. I could have a marital problem. I've had a marital problem. I decided to make different decisions about it. And now, as a result, I have the best marriage I've ever had, like better than when we first even got married. I've had other problems. I've had health problems, and I decided to change my life to where my health is better than it was before. It's all the story we tell ourselves. So the challenge becomes, what stories do you tell yourself? Do you as a doctor believe that none of your patients can afford dentistry, the right kind of dentistry? Therefore, you only prescribe to them what's broken and tell them that they need to fix the broken problems versus fixing whatever might actually need to be done in its entirety. Or as an employee in the office, do you feel like your boss doesn't hear you? Is that because you're telling yourself the story that they don't hear you? Or is that because what you want is a change? They hear you, but they just aren't willing to change it because all you're doing is complaining about something. You know, one of the things I tell all my employees is there's all kinds of challenges in our business, right? And I'm by no means a perfect leader. But if you have a problem, I expect you to bring 2 or 3 or 4 solutions to the problem. And then I'm willing to listen. If all you're doing is complaining, I don't want to hear it. It's not that I'm not hearing it. It's just you're not providing a solution. So I would surmise that if you don't feel heard as an employee, perhaps it's because you're not offering anything of value to solve the challenge. And it's not that your boss can't solve it, but you should probably play a role in solving it yourself as well. So it's not that you're not heard, it's just you're not offering something of enough value. And if I go back to the doctor example, maybe it's not fear of presenting treatment. Maybe it's fear that you're going to lose your employees. Maybe it's fear that if you raise the bar, your team will leave. And I think rather the alternative is probably true. If you raise the bar, they'll probably just perform better and find greater satisfaction. That doesn't mean it's not a tough conversation. That doesn't mean it's not awkward. And that doesn't mean that maybe there's not some negative repercussion that comes out of it. But I don't think it'll be nearly as bad as you think it will be. It's a story you're telling yourself. You know, it's no different than the little kids, right? When my kids were small and there was like a dirty clothes in the corner or the hamper and they saw the shadow, how big and ugly was the shadow? It was a big monster. And all I had to do is shine light on it and I'd be like, no, it's the hamper. So the question here for you is, can you shine light on your own stories? Can you shine the light of truth on your own stories? Because if all you do is believe the stories at surface value, they'll continue to be big monsters. But if you can shine the light of truth to understand that you probably have more options, you probably have more ability and more influence than you think. Whether you feel heard as an employee, you have more influence if you come with solutions than just complaints. We have far more power and influence than we could ever imagine. I like how Stephen Covey talked about the circle of concern versus a circle of influence. You know, the challenge with that is we all have these concerns, right? The economy, the world, this, that, what the government's doing. But our influence is maybe more limited. We can grow our influence, though, and shrink the area of concern by making better decisions and by understanding how much more influence we can have if we're willing to make some changes. So that's the question for you to think about. Can you shine the light of truth on your own stories to change them?